My parents refused to attend my graduation, but flew across the country for my brother's award. I didn't cry not this time. I let them watch my success from the sidelines just like they left me. They missed my moment, and I made sure they'll never be part of the next one. I still remember the sound of the rain that morning, thin and relentless, like someone whispering secrets against the windows. The air smelled faintly of wet concrete and eucalyptus, and I stood by the mirror trying to fix my hair into something that looked deliberate. It was my graduation day, the day I was supposed to feel proud, accomplished, whole. But all I could see in the reflection was the quiet, practiced smile of someone pretending not to care. Quick! Hit like, share with your friends, and subscribe. This story is about to get intense. I had left a voicemail for my parents the night before, not because I thought they'd come, but because some part of me still needed to believe they might. It's at 11, I'd said, my voice small. If you can make it, no pleading, no guilt, just information. As if I were telling strangers where the exits were. I should have known better. They'd already made plans to fly across the country for my brother's award ceremony, something about excellence in entrepreneurship. He had started a small company 2 years ago, and now there was talk of investors and magazine features. My mother's voice, light and airy over the phone, had said, "We're so proud of him, sweetie. You understand, don't you? It's a big opportunity for him." I'd nodded, even though she couldn't see me. I understood perfectly. By the time I zipped up the robe and pinned the cap in place, the apartment felt too quiet. The silence pressed against me in waves, the kind that makes your heartbeat sound too loud. My roommate, Lila, knocked gently before poking her head in. She wore a floral dress and the kind of smile that could almost convince you the world was kind. "You ready?" she asked, tilting her head. I nodded again, but she saw through it. Lila always did. She crossed the room, adjusted the tassel on my cap, and said softly, "You don't need them here to make this count. You know that, right?" I know. But I didn't, not really. The university auditorium was a blur of faces and color, parents waving phones, children bouncing on knees, flashes of cameras like lightning in an indoor storm. The announcer's voice echoed off the high ceilings as names rolled by in alphabetical precision. When mine was called, I walked across the stage, the applause sounding hollow, distant. I looked out into the sea of faces. All strangers. No one waved, no one stood. And in that second, under the bright, artificial light, something inside me settled into a quiet kind of certainty. It wasn't sadness anymore. It was the kind of silence that comes after years of trying to be heard and realizing the echo was never going to come back. After the ceremony, Lila took me to a diner off the highway, the kind with sticky menus and coffee that tasted faintly of metal. She insisted on paying, said it was her official graduation gift, and I didn't argue. The windows fogged from the rain outside, and for a moment it almost felt like comfort. "Are you going to tell them how it went?" she asked. "They'll probably see the pictures on social media," I said. She frowned. "That's not the same." I smiled thinly. "It's enough for them." We sat in silence for a while. Outside, cars hissed by, leaving trails of water in their wake. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled, slow, deliberate, like the sky clearing its throat. Later that night, I scrolled through my brother's posts. There they were. My parents, smiling in every photo, arms around him, champagne glasses raised, the caption reading, "Proud doesn't even begin to cover it," and there it was again. That quiet certainty, but sharper this time, like glass under skin. I didn't cry. Not this time. I just watched. And something inside me began to shift. A slow, quiet turning that I didn't fully understand yet. The next morning, I got an email from the university offering me a research position. It wasn't glamorous, but it was something, a foothold into the life I'd built for myself without anyone's applause. I accepted immediately. Over the next few months, my world shrank and focused. Work, late nights, quiet dinners alone. I found comfort in the routine, in knowing exactly what each day demanded. Sometimes I'd think about calling them, telling them about the job, the small milestones, but every time I picked up the phone, I'd imagine the inevitable pauses, the polite, That's nice, dear, followed by another update about my brother's success. So I stopped trying. Instead, I let the silence grow roots. It was during one of those long nights in the lab, surrounded by the hum of machines and the faint smell of ethanol, that I realized how far I'd drifted. There was no anger anymore, no resentment, just distance, wide and quiet, like an ocean you stopped trying to swim across. Sometimes I'd imagine what I'd say if they suddenly showed up, if they knocked on my door, apologetic, explaining they'd been wrong. I'd like to think I'd forgive them. But deep down, I knew I'd just watch them the way they once watched me, or from a distance, unmoved. Months turned into a year. The research job became a full-time position. I got published. Invitations started coming in. Conferences, guest lectures, even a small feature in a university magazine. Lila moved out to live with her boyfriend, and I found myself alone again, but not lonely this time. Just still. Then, one evening in late spring, I got a text from my mother. The first in over a year. He's being honored again. National recognition this time. We're flying out next week. Thought you'd like to know. That was it. No, how have you been? No mention of me, just him. I stared at the message for a long time before replying. That's great. Tell him congrats. She sent back a heart emoji. And that was the end of it. For days after, I couldn't stop thinking about how easy it was for her, how naturally she existed in a world where I was a background character. I began to wonder if maybe I'd always been that to them. The quiet one, the afterthought, the one who never needed saving because she learned not to ask. But then came the invitation, an email from the university. They wanted me to speak at the next commencement ceremony. A young alumna doing remarkable work, the letter said. They even offered to cover travel and accommodations. I said yes before I could think too hard about it. A week later, I was standing in front of a packed auditorium, looking out at hundreds of faces, nervous, expectant, hopeful. And for the first time, I wasn't the one sitting in the audience waiting to be seen. When I finished my speech, the applause was thunderous. People stood, cameras flashed, and all I could think was, they missed this, they missed all of it, and for once I was glad. But fate has a cruel sense of timing. Because later that evening, as I sat alone in my hotel room, my phone rang. It was my father. I hesitated before answering. His voice was calm, almost unfamiliar. We saw the video. He said, your speech. I said nothing. It was beautiful, he continued. We didn't know you'd been invited. Why would you? I said, the words sharper than I intended. There was a pause. Then softly, you've done well for yourself, kiddo. We're proud of you. Proud, that word again, the one that always came too late. Thanks, I said flatly. He cleared his throat. We were thinking, maybe we could visit soon, catch up. I looked out the window. The city lights shimmered in the rain. Somewhere far below, a siren wailed. I'll think about it, I said. But I already knew the answer. When the call ended, I sat there for a long time, staring at the reflection of myself in the dark glass, a faint silhouette surrounded by 1,000 points of light. And in that quiet, I realized something I hadn't dared to before. They could want to come back, but they'd never find the same person waiting, because the girl who once begged to be seen was gone. And all that remained was someone who'd learned how to let them watch. From the sidelines, just like they taught me to. They came 2 months later. I hadn't given them a clear answer about visiting, but one morning I opened the door and there they were, my mother holding a tray of lemon bars like some kind of peace offering, my father standing behind her with a tired smile that didn't reach his eyes. For a moment, I thought I was dreaming. They looked older than I remembered. Smaller somehow, like time had folded them in on themselves. Surprise, my mother said, her voice soft, uncertain. I blinked. You flew here? We were in the area, my father added quickly. Thought we'd drop by. It's been too long. Too long? As if time were the only thing keeping us apart. I stepped aside and let them in. The apartment suddenly felt smaller, the air thicker. My mother's perfume lingered in the doorway, sweet and familiar, like a scent I'd forgotten on purpose. She moved around the space like she was searching for something to say. It's cozy, she offered. You've made it your own. I nodded, watching her fingertips trail across the counter. I've been busy. Yes, we've seen that. The university post, the conference video. We're so proud, really. There it was again. That word. Like they thought if they said it enough times, it might rewrite the years between us. My father sat down at the edge of the couch, glancing at the framed photo on the shelf. Me and Lila at graduation, confetti in our hair. We should have been there, Utz, he said quietly. I didn't respond. The silence stretched. My mother fidgeted with the napkin she'd brought with the lemon bars, folding and unfolding it until it looked like a small paper animal dying in her hands. Finally, she looked up. We missed you. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was absurd. The way she said it, like I'd been the one who disappeared. Did you? I asked softly. Her lips parted, but no words came out. I let the question hang there. After a while, my father cleared his throat and changed the subject. Your brother's doing well, he said. He mentioned you haven't talked much. I poured coffee into 3 mismatched mugs. We don't really have much to talk about. He was worried you were upset with him, my mother said carefully. I'm not, I said. There's just nothing to say. My father sighed, his shoulders sagging like the weight of the years had finally settled there. You always were the quiet one. No, I said. You just never listened. The room went still. Even the hum of the refrigerator seemed to fade. For a moment, no one spoke. My mother's eyes glistened, but she didn't cry. She never did. She had perfected the art of almost breaking. After they left that afternoon, I sat in the silence they'd left behind. The lemon bars sat untouched on the counter, the smell of sugar and citrus turning sour in the air. That night, I dreamed of standing on a stage again, but the audience was empty. The lights were blinding, and somewhere in the dark, I could hear their voices. Faint, muffled, like they were underwater. I tried to speak, but no sound came out. When I woke up, my chest ached in that dull, familiar way. Days passed, then weeks. They texted occasionally, your ox, small things, safe things. Saw your name in an article or thinking of you. I replied sometimes, short messages that said little and meant even less. It might have stayed that way forever. The half connection, the polite distance, if not for the invitation. It arrived in early autumn. The university was hosting a national symposium, and my work had been nominated for a research award. Not something glamorous, but significant enough that they wanted to feature me on the main panel. I told myself it didn't matter who showed up this time, but a part of me, the part that still remembered that empty seat in the audience years ago, whispered otherwise. I didn't tell them about it. Not out of pettiness, but out of instinct. I didn't owe them that part of me anymore. Still, the night before the event, my phone rang again. It was my brother. I hadn't spoken to him in nearly a year. His voice was the same, confident, smooth, the kind of tone that fills silence without ever really saying anything. Hey, stranger, he said. Heard about your nomination. Congrats. Thanks, I said cautiously. Mom told me, he continued. They're planning to come. My heart skipped. They what? They said they didn't want to miss it this time. I closed my eyes. They weren't invited. He chuckled. They don't need an invitation. You're their daughter. I almost said something cruel, something that would have ended the conversation for good. But I didn't. I just let the silence stretch until he filled it again. You know, he said lightly, Mom still talks about your speech. She said you looked radiant. Radiant, I repeated. Yeah, I think she's trying, you know. They both are. Maybe, why not, I said. But sometimes trying after the fact doesn't undo what came before. He didn't argue, he just sighed, that soft exhale that used to mean, I'm done pretending this matters. Anyway, he said finally, good luck tomorrow. I mean it. When the call ended, I sat there for a long time, the room dim, except for the glow of the laptop screen. My reflection stared back at me. Tired eyes, steady breath, the faint outline of someone I barely recognized anymore. The next day, the symposium hall buzzed with quiet conversation, the hum of fluorescent lights overhead. I checked in, pinned my name tag to my blazer, and tried not to think about who might walk through the doors. The presentation went well. People clapped. Cameras flashed. And then, as I stepped off the stage, I saw them. My parents standing near the back, hesitant smiles frozen in place. For a second, I thought about turning away, pretending not to see. But something made me stop. They looked so small in that crowd. Two people who'd built their lives around appearances and now seemed lost among strangers who knew me better than they ever did. Afterward, my mother approached slowly, as if afraid I might vanish if she moved too fast. "You were wonderful," she said. Her voice trembled. "Truly?" My father nodded, eyes damp. "We're sorry we missed the last one." I met his gaze. "You didn't miss it," I said softly. "You chose something else." He flinched, just slightly, like the truth had landed harder than he expected. They tried to linger after, asking about dinner, about plans, about anything that might fill the years between us. I answered politely, like I was speaking to guests who'd overstayed their welcome. When they finally left, my mother hugged me, while quick, careful, like she wasn't sure she was allowed. "Don't shut us out," she whispered. I didn't answer. That night, I got a message from an unknown number. It was a photo. Me on stage earlier that day, the audience blurred behind me. No caption, no name. For a second, I thought it was from one of the event photographers, but something about it felt off. The angle, the distance. It looked like it had been taken from outside the main hall through glass. My chest tightened. I texted back, "Who is this?" No reply. Hours later, as I lay awake, I thought about that image. The blurred faces, the distance, the way it mirrored everything I'd ever felt about them. Always watching, never close enough to touch. In the morning, the message was gone. Deleted. Maybe it was a glitch. Maybe it was nothing. But something about it stayed with me. A faint unease that lingered at the edges of everything. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing small things. My office door slightly ajar when I swore I'd closed it. A missed call from an unlisted number. A car idling too long near the apartment gate. I told myself I was imagining it, that it was stress. But the feeling didn't fade. Then one evening, I got another text. This time from my mother. "Your father's not well. We're at the hospital." I drove there without thinking, the world outside blurring into streaks of light and rain. The corridor smelled of disinfectant and fear. She met me near the waiting room, eyes swollen, voice cracking. "It's his heart," she whispered. "They're running tests." I nodded, numb. Hours later, when they finally let us see him, he looked smaller than ever. Pale, fragile, 1,000 miles from the man who used to fill a room with his certainty. He smiled weakly when he saw me. "Hey, kiddo." "Hey. I didn't think you'd come." I didn't either. He chuckled, a dry, quiet sound. "Guess we're both full of surprises." We sat there for a while, saying nothing. The machines hummed softly, keeping time. Then, just as I was about to leave, he said something that froze me. "Your brother's not coming." I turned. "What?" "He said he's too busy. Said he'll visit next week." My stomach twisted. "He always comes for you." My father's eyes softened. People change. I wanted to tell him that wasn't true, that people only change the direction of their neglect, but I didn't. I just nodded, took his hand for a moment, and left. Outside, the air was cold and sharp. As I reached the parking lot, my phone buzzed again. Another photo. This time, it was me sitting beside his hospital bed. The angle. Over the shoulder, through glass again. No caption, no name. Just distance. The hospital parking lot glowed faintly under sodium lights, that peculiar amber haze that makes everything look like an old photograph. I stood there, phone in hand, staring at the image for what felt like hours. My reflection stared back from the glass, hollow-eyed, drenched in uncertainty. Someone was watching. But the question wasn't who. It was why now. The photo wasn't threatening, not exactly. It wasn't even invasive, just observant. Almost like someone trying to remind me that they were there, that I wasn't as invisible as I used to be. I thought about showing it to my mother inside, but what would I say? That someone was following me? That I felt haunted by presence and absence in equal measure? No. She'd look at me with that same worried sympathy she used when I cried as a child, the kind that felt more like dismissal than comfort. So I deleted it and told myself to stop imagining ghosts. The next few days blurred together: tests, doctor consultations, and the slow, exhausting rhythm of waiting rooms. My mother moved through it all with mechanical grace, organizing paperwork, answering questions, offering coffee to strangers like she could barter kindness for control. One evening, as the sun folded itself into the horizon, I found her sitting alone in the cafeteria, hands wrapped around a paper cup she wasn't drinking from. "He'll be okay," I said gently. She didn't look up. "The doctor says we caught it in time." Her voice was steady, but her eyes, those glassy, distant eyes, were somewhere else entirely. We sat in silence for a while. Then, without warning, she said, "You always thought we didn't care, didn't you?" The words landed like a small, deliberate knife. I hesitated. "I didn't think," I said slowly. "I knew." She flinched, then smiled, the brittle kind that hurts to watch. "We did, you know. We just didn't know how to show it, not with you." "Why?" "Because you didn't need us." I stared at her. "That's not true." She turned toward the window. "You were always so quiet, so self-contained. Your brother, he needed us. You didn't." I felt the words crawl under my skin, cold and familiar. "That's the story you told yourself. It made it easier." Her eyes filled, but she didn't cry. Maybe it did. For a moment, I almost reached for her hand, but something in me held back. That old instinct of not giving comfort where none was given. When I left the hospital that night, the air felt different, heavy, charged. As I crossed the parking lot, a car engine started somewhere behind me. Headlights flared, then dimmed. I turned, heart thudding. Nothing, just an empty stretch of asphalt and the faint hum of the freeway beyond. I walked faster, keys clutched tight in my fist, the echo of my footsteps unnaturally loud. At home, I double-checked the locks, sat on the couch, waited for my breathing to slow, and there, on the coffee table, was a new envelope. No name, no postage, just sitting there like it had always been part of the room. Inside was a single photo. Not of me, of them. My parents, years ago, at my brother's award ceremony. My mother's hand resting proudly on his shoulder, both of them smiling. In the background, barely visible, was me, standing in the crowd, half turned away, forgotten. I dropped the picture. It wasn't anger that hit me, it was something colder, deeper. The realization that someone out there remembered that day better than they ever did. And they wanted me to see it. I didn't sleep that night. The city outside hummed like a living thing. Sirens, trains, the faint pulse of life continuing somewhere else. I sat by the window, the photo lying face down on the floor. By morning, I'd convinced myself to stop chasing meaning where there was none. Maybe someone found it online, printed it, sent it as some twisted art piece. Or maybe it was coincidence. Coincidence was easier to believe than intention. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was trying to make me remember. Not what happened, but what I'd tried to bury. When my father was discharged a week later, my mother insisted we have dinner together. "Just the three of us," and she said. Like old times. There were no old times to return to. Only fragments. Muted dinners, polite conversation, laughter that never reached anyone's eyes. But I went. Out of habit, maybe, or morbid curiosity. The house looked the same. Same cream-colored walls, same framed photos, same hollow quiet that lived between rooms. My father sat at the head of the table, pale but smiling. "Feels good to have everyone here," he said. My mother served roast chicken. It tasted like nostalgia and tension. Halfway through the meal, my father said, "I've been thinking a lot in the hospital. About time. About everything." My mother glanced at him, uncertain. He continued, "I wasn't there when I should have been. For you." He looked at me directly. Both of us weren't. My throat tightened. I didn't trust my voice, so I said nothing. He nodded, as if expecting that. I can't change the past, he said softly, but I don't want to spend whatever's left pretending. We didn't break something. For the first time, the apology didn't sound rehearsed. It sounded like a man standing in the ruins of something he'd only just realized he'd destroyed. After dinner, I helped clear the dishes. My mother stood by the sink, staring out the window into the dark. You know, she said almost to herself, he keeps an old box of your letters in the attic. I froze. What letters? The ones you sent from college. He never threw them out. I didn't know he kept them. She smiled faintly. He reads them sometimes, late at night. There was something both comforting and unbearable about that. The image of him sitting in that dim attic, surrounded by words I'd written years ago, long after I stopped believing he'd ever read them. Later, when I was leaving, he pressed a small envelope into my hand. Just something I wanted you to have, he said. Inside was a photo, the same one from my graduation, the one I'd never received from the university photographer. Except in this one, the frame had been cropped. My parents were there, standing in the crowd, blurry but visible. You were there, I whispered. He nodded. We came. We didn't stay long. Why didn't you tell me? He sighed. We thought it would make it worse, to show up after everything. But I kept the photo. I wanted to remember that we did come. Something in my chest cracked quietly. All these years, I'd built an entire narrative on absence. And here was proof of their presence. Flawed, hesitant, too late, but real. I drove home with the envelope on the passenger seat. My thoughts a tangle of confusion and ache. The photo changed nothing and everything at once. That night, I dreamed again, the stage, the empty seats. But this time, I wasn't alone. I could see faint silhouettes in the shadows watching. Not close enough to touch, but there. When I woke, the apartment felt different. The fear, the tension, it had dulled, replaced by something softer. Not forgiveness exactly, but the exhaustion that comes after hating for too long. I sat on the floor, the morning light slanting across the photo. For the first time, I allowed myself to believe they had tried, in their own clumsy, fractured way. And maybe that was enough. Then, just as the peace began to settle, my phone buzzed again. A message, no name, just 2 words, check upstairs. I froze. The apartment didn't have an upstairs. My pulse hammered as I looked around, the silence suddenly heavy again. Then I saw it. The small, blinking light near the bookshelf. A camera. Hidden, barely visible behind a stack of books. I moved slowly, my hands trembling, until I could pull it free. A tiny device, no bigger than my thumb. Inside, a memory card. I slotted it into my laptop, heart pounding. Hundreds of files, all of me, working, eating, sleeping. The angles, always from corners, doorways, the quiet periphery of my life. But among them was something else. A video. Of the hospital, my father's room. The camera had caught me holding his hand, then leaving. A few minutes later, another figure entered the frame. My brother. He wasn't supposed to have come. He stood by the bed for a long moment, looking down at our father. Then he reached into his pocket, pulled out a phone, and took a photo. Through the glass. The same angle. The same distance. The same watchful, deliberate stillness. I watched, frozen. He turned toward the camera once, briefly, his face half lit by the monitor glow. And he smiled. Not the bright, charming smile I remembered. Something else. Something that said I was always watching. The screen flickered, and then it went black. The screen stayed black for a long time. I sat there, the soft hum of the laptop fan filling the room, the glow painting my hands in the cold blue light. The world outside went on, traffic whispering, wind pressing against glass. But inside, something in me had gone completely still. My brother. I played the video again. The same small movements. The same silence. The way he turned to the camera like he knew exactly where it was. I remembered his call before the symposium, that offhanded line. They're planning to come. The ease in his voice, the absence of curiosity about my life. I thought it was indifference. Maybe it was something else. I sat back, trying to breathe. Why would he do this? What was he trying to tell me? I looked again at the folder of footage. The earliest file was months old, long before the hospital, long before the symposium. Some of the videos were from my old apartment before I'd even moved. That wasn't possible, unless he'd been saving them for a long time. I felt the panic rising, then ebbing. Instead of fear, a strange calm settled over me. The kind that comes when the final piece slides into place and the picture is terrible but complete. He had been the one sending the photos, not to threaten me, to remind me. Of what? Of how I'd left first, of how I'd stepped out of the family and forced them to orbit around his success because mine frightened them. Or maybe it was punishment for being the one who never asked. I didn't want to believe it, but the pattern was too deliberate. I spent the rest of the night sitting by the window, laptop open, city lights flickering across the walls like ghosts. Every sound became amplified. The refrigerator's hum, the creak of the old radiator, the faint buzz of a phone notification that wasn't mine. At dawn, I called my mother. She answered on the second ring, her voice groggy but careful. "Sweetheart, is everything all right?" "I found something," I said. "Something about him." A pause. Then, "Your brother?" "Yes." She didn't sound surprised. The silence that followed was long enough to hear the birds outside beginning their first calls of the morning. Finally, she said, "Maybe you should come here. We need to talk." I drove in silence. The highway, a ribbon of pale light stretching endlessly ahead. The world looked washed out, fragile, the way it does after a long night of not sleeping. When I reached their house, the curtains were drawn. My mother stood in the doorway, the same robe she'd worn every morning of my childhood tied loosely at her waist. Her eyes were red, not from crying but from something deeper, years of things never said. "Where is he?" I asked. She stepped aside. Inside. My brother was sitting at the kitchen table, perfectly composed, scrolling through something on his phone. When he saw me, he smiled. Casual, unbothered. "Hey," he said. "You look tired." I set the small camera on the table. "You've been in my apartment." His smile faltered, then returned. "You're welcome." "Welcome?" He leaned back, folding his arms. "I wanted you to see what we saw. What you looked like when you thought no one was paying attention." I stared at him. "You filmed me?" "You filmed yourself," he said softly. "Every paper, every speech, every award. You've been documenting everything for years, just not from the angles that mattered." "What are you talking about?" He reached for the camera, but I pulled it back. "You wanted them to regret it," he said, nodding toward the other room where our parents' voices murmured faintly. "Every success, every applause. It wasn't about the work. It was about them missing it. I just made sure they could see it. All of it." My stomach turned. "You're lying," he shrugged. "Maybe, but you knew I was good at keeping records." I looked at my mother, who stood by the doorway, silent. "You knew?" She hesitated. "He told us you'd be angry if you knew he was filming. He said it was for a documentary, about family, about distance. We thought—" Her voice trailed off. I looked back at him. "You used them." "I showed them," he corrected. "The way you've been showing the world. The way you wanted to be seen, finally." Something inside me cracked. "That's not your story to tell." He smiled, small and tired. "Then why did you leave it unfinished?" The words hit harder than I expected. He stood and walked past me toward the hallway, his voice calm. "You wanted them to understand what it felt like to be invisible. You got it. They've been watching every night, every talk, every panel, every lonely meal. You made sure of that." I turned to my mother. "Is that true?" She looked away. "We just wanted to be close again." The room felt suddenly smaller, the air thick with the weight of too many truths. All those nights I thought I was alone, whispering speeches to myself, writing papers until dawn. Somewhere they were there, watching, mistaking observation for love. I walked out before either of them could speak again. The morning light had broken through the clouds, harsh and white, washing the street in clarity. I drove until the city gave way to open fields, until the radio lost its signal, and the horizon blurred into haze. Somewhere along that endless stretch of road, I pulled over and got out. The wind was cold and clean. I held the camera in my hand for a long time, feeling its small weight, its promise of memory. Then I set it down in the grass and walked away. For the first time, no one was watching. Days passed, weeks, the messages stopped, the photos stopped. The silence that followed was almost kind. My father's health improved slowly. My mother sent the occasional text, short, uncertain, as if afraid I might not answer. I did sometimes. Simple replies. I'm okay. I'm working. Hope he's better. My brother never called. I saw his name once on a news page, an article about a grant he'd won, a photograph of him smiling at a podium. In the background, a blurred figure in the audience caught my eye. My mother. Always there. Always watching. I closed the page. Time moved on the way it always does. Quietly, relentlessly. I moved apartments, started a new project, learned to live in smaller, lighter spaces. The echoes faded. But sometimes, late at night, I catch myself glancing toward the corner of the room, half expecting a small light to blink back at me. Not out of fear anymore, but out of habit. And sometimes I imagine what it must look like from the other side. This version of me, finally still, finally silent. If they're still watching, I hope they see this. I'm not angry anymore. Just tired. Tired of being the reflection of what they missed. Tired of performing forgiveness for people who only know how to love from a distance. The real tragedy, I think, isn't that they weren't there when I needed them. It's that when they finally tried to be, they couldn't tell the difference between love and surveillance. They wanted to witness my life. And now they have. Every moment, every silence, every truth I didn't speak out loud. Maybe that's enough. Maybe that's all any of us ever get. An audience that arrives too late, applause that echoes after the stage is empty. I still keep the graduation photo on my desk. The cropped one, the proof that they came. The proof that I wasn't entirely alone. Sometimes in certain light, I can almost believe the smile on their faces was real. And sometimes that's enough. Other nights, I imagine the unseen camera blinking to life somewhere far away, recording again. Not to spy, but to remember. A different kind of watching. A quieter one. Not the hunger to possess a moment, but the wish not to lose it entirely. If that's what they meant all along, then maybe I finally understand. We were all just trying not to disappear. Autumn came early that year. The air turned sharp before the leaves had even begun to fall. The mornings heavy with mist that made the world look half-remembered. I'd moved into a smaller apartment by then. A top-floor space with tall windows and quiet neighbors. A place that didn't echo when I walked through it. Most days, I woke before sunrise, made coffee, watched the light creep across the buildings opposite mine. The silence didn't feel empty anymore. It felt earned. Like something I'd built piece by piece from the wreckage of everything that had come before. I started keeping a journal again, not for research notes or papers, but just to write without purpose. Some entries were no more than a sentence. Others filled pages, half memories, half confessions. Sometimes I'd reread them and wonder if I was still telling the truth or just practicing the language of self-forgiveness. Once I found myself writing a letter I never sent. Dear Mom and Dad, you were right. I was quiet. I still am. But silence isn't the absence of love. It's what you leave behind when you run out of ways to ask for it. I folded it neatly and tucked it between the pages of an old book. Maybe one day I'll send it. Maybe not. The following weeks blurred into a rhythm I could almost mistake for peace. Work during the day, long walks at dusk, evenings spent on the balcony with a blanket wrapped around me, the city stretching endlessly below. One evening, as I watched the sunset dissolve into the skyline, a message came through from my mother. We're proud of you. Always were. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I wanted to say it while there's still time. No punctuation after time. For a moment, I wasn't sure how to read it. Was she sick? Was it just another way of saying we're getting older? I typed and erased my reply 3 times before sending. Thank you. That night, I dreamed of our old house, the smell of lemon polish and rain, the sound of my brother laughing somewhere upstairs. In the dream, I walked from room to room, but every door opened into a different version of my life. One where they came to graduation, one where I didn't care, one where we all learned to listen before it was too late. When I woke, there were tears on my face, though I couldn't tell if they were for what was or what could have been. Weeks later, a small package arrived at my door. No return address, just my name written in my mother's looping handwriting. Inside was a stack of old photographs bound with a thin piece of twine. Some I'd seen before: birthdays, vacations, family dinners. But tucked near the bottom was one I'd never noticed. Me, maybe 8 or 9, sitting at the kitchen table with a drawing in front of me, my father's hand on my shoulder, my mother standing just behind him, mid-laugh, eyes soft. Someone had written on the back in my father's handwriting, "We didn't know how to say it, but we saw you. Always." I stared at it for a long time. The memory itself was gone, dissolved into the blur of childhood. But the evidence was there, a single captured second of connection that time hadn't managed to erase. I pinned the photo to the wall above my desk, not as proof of forgiveness, but as a kind of marker, a reminder that even flawed love leaves an imprint. Some nights I still think about the recordings, the photos, the quiet obsession with watching. It would be easy to see it as intrusion, control, the desperate act of people trying to rewrite a past they'd abandoned. But sometimes I wonder if maybe it was something else. Maybe after years of absence, they didn't know how to be present anymore. Watching was the only language they remembered. And as for my brother, I haven't seen him since that morning in the kitchen. He sent one message months later. "I was only trying to help you tell your story." I never replied. But I've thought about that line often, because maybe in his own strange way he did. Maybe he understood something I didn't, that our stories aren't just what we live, but what others decide to remember of us. I still carry the small camera. I don't use it, but I keep it in a drawer beside my desk like a relic. Sometimes I imagine turning it on again, pointing it at myself and pressing record, not to document proof of living, but to speak the words I never said aloud. To say, "This is me, I am still here," and maybe that's enough. The world moves on as it always does. The city changes. Faces fade. But there's a strange peace in knowing that somewhere across distance and time, they might still be watching, not through lenses or screens, but in memory. The kind of watching that isn't about control. The kind that simply says, "I remember you." Every now and then, I visit my father. His health has stabilized. He smiles easier these days. My mother always insists on baking something, lemon bars, as if to reset the clock. We sit on the porch, talk about the weather, about books, about anything that doesn't risk the past spilling out again. We never mention the recordings, or the graduation, or the years between. We've learned to coexist in that quiet space between apology and acceptance. And in that silence, I think we've finally found a kind of peace. Not forgiveness, not absolution, just the simple grace of choosing to stay, even when staying hurts. Sometimes I imagine what life would have been if they'd shown up that first time. If I'd seen them in the crowd, waving, proud, unconditionally there. Would I have felt different? Would I have become someone else entirely? I'll never know, but maybe that's the point. Some moments aren't meant to be repaired. They're meant to be understood. And sometimes understanding is enough to stop the ache from becoming who you are. So I live, quietly, purposefully, without the need for witnesses. The stage lights have dimmed, but the echoes remain, soft, distant, like rain on the night of a graduation long past. And every time I hear that sound, I smile. Because I know now that I don't need them to see me anymore. I just needed to see myself. And maybe that's where this story ends. Not with revenge or resolution or applause, but with the stillness that comes when you finally stop performing for ghosts. The world outside keeps moving, as it always will. The light shifts. The air cools. And in that small apartment, A woman who once waited for her parents to look up finally closes her eyes and lets the silence hold her. Not empty, just enough. What does it mean to be seen, truly seen, by the people who shaped you? Is love still love if it arrives too late? Can forgiveness exist without apology? Or is silence its own kind of answer? When we chase recognition, are we really searching for understanding? Or just proof that our pain left a mark? And when the world finally does look our way, will we still recognize the person we wanted them to see, or have we already become someone else entirely?